Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Shed Gospel. It's Nigel Woolley, and today I'm just going to do a quick subject on the constitutional freedoms we have of political communication. And the reason for us having freedom of political communication is because primarily we get to elect our representatives. We need to be able to discuss matters at hand that are going on and things that could affect our right to vote and the way that we vote for a candidate. And because essentially in Australia under our constitution, because it's the will of the people enumerating in the constitution, because we created it, because we debated it, and because it's created them, certainly our federal government, but now even the state governments are subject to it. In all cases, the people are put constitutionally supreme. And because we're the only ones that can amend the Constitution and change it through referendum, then having a look at our rights to communicate freely, freedom of speech and the foundational doctrine of having freedom of communicating with one another about matters political and also matters that can be politicised, even may not be an issue that's on the table, but something that comes up. That is all covered under the scope of freedom of political communication, and you'll find it in decisions of the High Court where they talk about that, where the people's rights to vote to not to be inhibited in any way, and that's why you'll find it even in the Telecommunications Act in Australia, which is a federal act. The Telecommunications Act 1997, Part 6, Division 7, Section 138 says implied freedom of political communications. This part does not apply to the extent, if any, that it would infringe any constitutional doctrine of implied freedom of political communication. So that means that on the platforms such as operating here in Australia, on the carriers, mobile networks, anything that's able to transmit a message from one place to another operating here within Australia on our shores has to be able to allow the freedom of political communication. So they can't shut down free speech here in Australia because it's an understood central tenet to our democracy, but it's a constitutional position that no matter what they do, while ever the Constitution's in effect, while ever it's the will of the people and it's created them, the Parliament, they have the obligation and the responsibility to ensure that we can freely communicate with one another, and that is a foundational. That's so foundational that we must be able to have freedom of speech. We must be able to even communicate our ideas, And when one person wants to shut down a conversation saying, "Oh, it's getting too political," that's nothing that they cannot shut down a conversation if it's getting too political. Because that is the freedom, that is a constitutional doctrine of freedom of political communication. So if someone's saying, "Oh, we don't want to get too political about something," I mean, you can go there if you want to. You can discuss anything you want to, because especially for matters that are red hot on the table at the moment, such as, the vaccines or medical research going on, mask wearing, climate change, whether it's true or false or whatever, all of the censure and the way that they're trying to censor people from speaking out is actually against the constitutional doctrine of the freedom of political communication. So the media are acting out of control. I mean, they use their free speech all the time to say whatever they want, but also to try and shut people down. And I saw something yesterday where essentially, I think it was on the morning show, Today's Show or something, but they were interviewing Gladys Berejiklian, our New South Wales Premier, asking her about how does she feel about Craig Kelly's speaking out about vaccines and other treatments. And she was put into the corner. Basically, the media was trying to corner her to have a vote or to have a say on whether he should be speaking out about these things, even because he's in the same Liberal Party of Australia. But I mean, Gladys didn't really answer the question But the issue is that we cannot afford to censor any form of political communication, because what that does is that begins to eat away at our democracy or our democratic rights to vote and the way we vote for our candidates and way our candidates represent themselves or what they're doing for us. You know, if we can't discuss those subjects, no matter how volatile the subject might be, we have the constitutional... There's a constitutional right and there's a constitutional doctrine that we have the freedom to have political communications. So hopefully that's just a, you know, free speech is all in there, but political communication being not just talking about decisions at the moment, but things that can come up, you know, politicised subjects. It covers a very broad range of things, and it ties back into their obligation to make sure that we can vote for our candidates without any trouble, without any bias, without any infringement upon our freedom to pick and choose who we want and to discuss freely, you know, if this is a good candidate or a bad candidate because of their stance on certain subjects, whether we think the subject's true or false. I mean, all of that can infringe the way that we, you know, if they're trying to shut that conversation down, that will then begin to, they're acting out of bounds to do anything to shut things down, because effectively we were the ones, looking at it from an aerial view, we were the ones that gave them the powers to do what they do, but then they can't go and use the same powers that we've given them to go and shut us back down so that they become a law unto themselves. That's it in a nutshell. So hopefully that's something interesting for you. Have a look at the Telecommunications Act 1997. In section 138 of that, just gives you some implied freedoms of political communication, which there is a bit of a safeguard against platforms like Facebook, some of these other ones in Australia that that may seek to try and infringe upon that right and freedom that we have. So God bless you, friends. I'll talk to you later. See you next time. God bless. Bye.